Good evening, Professor Samuel. Good evening, everybody. Dr. Olopade, good evening. Can you hear me?
Good evening, sir. How are you,
Good
sir?
evening, sir.
I'm fine. I hope everybody is having a peaceful Tuesday afternoon. Uh,
We are
Professor Samuel,
trying.
it's good to hear your voice again. I like your smile.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Only we are waiting on you
Yeah, don't worry.
to
I think we
to
can we
answer
can go
to
ahead and
answer to answer the girls.
no, how can you be calling yourself girls again? You
Ah,
now, you are
Ogami,
one
sir.
of our
Ask Mr.
you are one of
Samuel, he will
our
tell you that
owners.
I'm a girl. Ask Mr. Samuel, he
No,
will tell you that I'm a girl.
no, you are not a girl.
I am a girl, oh.
Yeah, very
I
serious
am
lady.
still a girl, oh.
Well done. Thank you
Thank you,
for the
sir.
effort and thank you for honoring our invitation. Chief Olopade, I think we can just start this meeting. Others will join so that we stay on time.
Okay, sir. Good evening, Mr. President and dear distinguished members of Endocrine and Metabolism Society of Nigeria. You're welcome to the very first World Hormone Day webinar presentation. And the theme today is Because Hormone Matters, from Signal to Solution in Human Health. We have one of our distinguished Professor Aderonke Samuel, who will be doing justice to this topic. And just to mention that the World Hormone Day is set to hold every April 24th of April of every year. And the aim is to raise global awareness regarding the vital importance of hormone health under the theme Because Hormone Matters. And this was initiated by the European Society for Endocrinology and brought over by International Society for Endocrinology. And this focuses on educating the public on how hormones regulate metabolism, growth, and mood to encourage early detection of disorders like diabetes and thyroid diseases. The objective is to highlight hormone imbalances, which contribute significantly to chronic and rare diseases, and urging better diagnosis, research, and healthier lifestyle choices. The actionable steps is that which ASE, that's European Society for Endocrinology, is encouraging is that we should share these resources, raise awareness, and support those living with endocrine conditions generally. And why the title? Why does it matter? Because hormones are essential for health. It regulates nearly every bodily function. And when this balance is out of control, it causes conditions that we've mentioned like cancer, osteoporosis, obesity, and over 400 rare endocrine cases. So this evening, I want to encourage every one of us to mute our mics as much as possible at all times, except when you're called to speak. And let us make sure that we use our cameras appropriately and be mindful of our background and appearance, and let us appear professional. And as much as possible, when the speaker is speaking, please let us refrain from multitasking or engage in side conversation, and no self-promotion as much as possible. And when it is time for interaction, you can use the Q&A session, you can use the chat box or raise your electronic hand and you'll be recognized. And as much as possible, let us respect each other and follow the instructions that are given on this platform. So I want to just use this opportunity to call on the president, Professor Andrew Loco, to give a brief chat before our speaker comes up.
So, good evening once again, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is our pleasure to host you again to our educational series that, as you already know, we kickstarted this year with a timetable that, so far, to the glory of God, we have been able to keep track and we are up to date. The talk this evening is going to be handled by an eminent scholar that has already been introduced, Professor Aderonke Samuel. is one of us. She is a very prominent scientist and measures very, very robustly in the area of basic sciences. Each time she represents the voice for the basic sciences. When we are carried away by our clinical sentiment, she reminds us that the basic sciences provide bedrock for whatever we are doing in the clinical sciences. And we really appreciate perseverance and steadfastness in propelling the banners of endocrine uh, research, scientific endeavors, and activities. We are going to be listening to her. I'm not going to take all the time talking. There is a wealth of knowledge that she's going to share. Let's learn from it and let's see how we can help our patients and practice generally. So it is my pleasure as chairman of this event to declare this presentation open and to invite Professor Samuel to carry on with the lecture. Thank you very much.
So, Professor Samuel, you have the floor, ma'am.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I sincerely thank the leadership of the Endocrine and Metabolism Society of Nigeria-EMSON, our own Professor Andrew Oloko, the executives and members of EMSON. I thank you all most sincerely for calling on me to speak and share my thoughts this evening. I also thank every distinguished guest who is online. And I say a big thank you and good evening to everyone. Like you heard, the World Hormone Day 2026 comes up on the 24th of April every year. But this year, the European Society, ESE, asks that every EMSON, every endocrinology society should celebrate the day. And it is just to raise the global awareness on the vital role of hormones in health, just like our Secretary General had said. And so this evening, I will be sharing my thoughts on the title, Because Hormones Matter, from Signals to Solution in Human Diseases. And I'm glad to be here. Well, like I said, it is to celebrate and commemorate World Hormone Day. Now, hormones are signals. They are the language of life. At the most fundamental levels, people think hormones are signals. They say they're chemical messengers and that they're released in precise amounts at precise time, and they act on precise targets. And what do they do when they do that? They regulate growth, metabolism, reproduction, mood, behavior. So if you think of the network, if you carry a phone, whether a smart or a non-smartphone, and you think of the network that makes your phone work, then the hormones are the body's internal network. But hormones are not just chemical messengers. They are the language of physiological control. And when that language is distorted, the result is disease. And so what it means is that at every time, the language of hormone must not be distorted. And when we understand this, we can begin to unlock the solutions to any and every of the diseases. So from metabolism, if care is not taken, you can move to malignancy. From being fertile, you can move to inflammation. Hormones actually define the trajectory of human health. So the signal, hormones act as specialized signals, and that has been researched, that is scientifically proven. They are released by the endocrine glands. These are specialized glands. And when they're released directly into the bloodstream. And when they get there, they regulate physiology, behavior, and homeostasis. They travel to distant target tissues and organs, and they bind to specific receptors where they will initiate the actions I have spoken about: growth, metabolism, and reproduction. And so when they talk about hormonal signal, we can envision the picture in front of us where hormones are produced at a particular place and they pass through the bloodstream to a target organ or a target tissue. And so that is called the hormonal signaling. Now, what is the central thesis? Hormones operate across three interconnected domains. One, the signal is generated, and the signal is generated through the endocrine gland and tissues. Two, the signal is transmitted, and when the signal is transmitted, it passes through the bloodstream, through the circulation. The signal then gets to the target tissue. It is received by the receptor. Depending on the type of signal that is being passed or the hormone passing the signal, there is an intracellular cascade, either on the surface of the cell where it is going or inside the nucleus of the cell. And at the end of the day, there is an interpretation of the signal that has been generated. So the signal can be interpreted as gene expression or a cellular response. If it is a gene expression, that means will other hormones be made? Will some proteins be produced? Are you going to run? Are you going to grow hair? Will your breast get bigger? Will your voice break? Will you grow taller? Depending on what the signal that was initially generated is, the interpretation will follow suit. As I speak, scientists have identified, they have been able to classify 50 hormones in the human body. But let me say quickly that some are saying that there are over 200 hormones. And these are hormone-like substances, and that they exist to regulate bodily functions. So this is the central thesis of the hormone, from signal generation to signal transmission to signal expression. Disease arises when there is a failure at any of the levels I have mentioned before. So if there is too much signal, then there is hyperfunction. For example, we hear hyperthyroidism. If there is too little signal, meaning if too little hormone is produced, there is hypofunction. Adrenaline insufficiency is a good example. Now, if the signal that has been produced, even if it is enough, but the interpretation of that signal is wrong, then there is a resistance. And so you hear insulin resistance. So anytime there is a failure at any of the three levels, diseases will arise. And the basic scientists will say anytime there is disequilibrium, diseases will arise. So this is a typical endocrine system. And if you look at the picture in front of us, looking at all the places where the endocrine system occurs, it will then show you the importance of hormones. Because from your brain down to the reproductive system, all through, the endocrine systems are there. And that means that at each and every one of these endocrine systems, hormones are produced. And you can see, at every one of those endocrine system. You can see the hormones that can be produced. Like I told you, 50 have been well studied, but some says we have more than 200 hormones or hormone-like molecules. Now, I told you about the signal and what happens when the signal is produced. So, when the hormone signal goes wrong, there is a global and a local burden. Hormonal disorders now constitute a significant proportion of global non-communicable diseases. But here's the key. When hormonal signal changes, disease pattern also change and the population change. Let's take a look at our country, Nigeria. Nigeria is witnessing a rise in endocrine and metabolic disorders. The commonest diabetes prevalence is estimated at 5 to 6% of the population. And the International Diabetes Federation in 2023 says that there are actually several undiagnosed cases of diabetes. Urban obesity rates are increasing, contributing to metabolic syndrome, and 20% of adults are said to have obesity. And these days, when people are now working from home or working off-site, or they go to work once in a while, they go once a week, you can imagine what we intend to see in the next year or two. Thyroid disorders and infertility are often hormonally driven. And they're common, but sometimes they're undiagnosed due to limited access to testing. We'll come to access to testing. If we also look at Africa, across Africa, there are over 24 million adults with diabetes. And this is projected to increase significantly in the next couple of years. So you can imagine 24 million adults. Nobody's talking about the children, just adults alone. So it is also known that almost 50% of cases remain undiagnosed, and they remain undiagnosed because of different reasons, either because of access to a good hospital, maybe they're far away from where an hospital is, or what we have in our country. When you say a disease, somebody says, I reject it in Jesus' name. So sometimes people are not even willing and ready to accept that what they have is the disease you're talking about. Also, these days, a lot of people now do the self-help medication. Because Mrs. A used drug D, you too can use it. In fact, when she used it, she was coughing. Now that you are coughing, use the same drug. And so the individual refuses to go to a proper place to be diagnosed. So 50% of the cases across Africa still remain undiagnosed. Like I said, rapid urbanization and lifestyle transitions are driving endocrine disorders. We eat the food of the West. We do the things of the West. Of course, we know that in the West, being obese, especially the stomach area obesity, is a thing. So there is a growing silent endocrine epidemic that we are not taking note of. Well, we've looked at Nigeria. We've also looked at across Africa. Let's look at the people we copy the most. In the US, 37.3 million people have diabetes, and that is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And this is as recent as the year 2022. I am sure this number will have almost doubled by now because this is 2026. About 1 in 3 adults have prediabetes, meaning that when you check their level, they are almost at the diabetic level. Obesity prevalence exceeds 40%, and that is a key hormonal disorder. As a matter of fact, a lot of obesity issues have been implicated in a lot of the male-related cancers. So you can imagine what we have on our hands. It's indeed an epidemic. Now, how do we bridge the gap? This is where basic science, like my president said, meets the clinical reality collaboration. And how do that happen? It is through collaboration. We cannot say it has to be clinical all the time. There must be the synergy between the basic scientists and the clinicians so that in collaborating, we can begin to bridge this epidemic gap. Bridging the gap. And why does the context matters? If you see the number in Nigeria, you see the number in across Africa, and you see the number in US, you will see that there is a critical truth in all the numbers, that indeed we have an epidemic on our hands. Now, the biology of hormone is universal. I have shown you the critical thesis, how hormones would move. But the outcomes are shaped by different contexts. Trust me, the outcome you have in the US is not the outcome you have in Nigeria. And it is even not the outcome we have in Africa. In the US, their challenge is complexity and the cost of care. If you are not on the insurance, sometimes it becomes a burden. And then most of the time, the hormonal issue carries some other comorbidities along with it. In Africa, our challenge is access to good health, good diagnostic centers. And most of the time, our challenge again is awareness. That's across Africa. Are people really aware? In Nigeria, the challenge is both, meaning cost is our challenge. Access to a good healthcare place is a challenge. Access to a good diagnostic place is a challenge. Awareness is a challenge. Even when people are aware, they reject everything in Jesus' name. And then complicity. Sometimes the individual has some other core diseases that is actually things that, and they think, oh, those other diseases are important. So let me just face this one. Let me leave that other one. And when it comes to awareness, some people are just taking drugs without even knowing what they're taking. And if you look at all the challenges, you can then add with it the health system constraints. I am not too sure how many primary health centers we have. I'm not even too sure how many of them get their drugs as at when due. They get their intervention drugs from the central distribution area as at when due. I am not too sure how many people have access even to a tertiary health institution. Sometimes you find that what they should bring to a tertiary health institution, they take to a primary health institution. So there are a lot of issues. And in recent times, if we will tell ourselves the truth, the budgetary allocation to health has become another major challenge. And this is where collaboration becomes essential. As basic scientists, we must begin to ask ourselves, how do genetic and environmental factors in Nigeria or African population influences hormonal pathway? For too long, we have relied on data from the West. The clinician must also ask themselves, how can we diagnose earlier with limited resources? Everyone will agree with me that resources are limited. And so together we must answer the question, how do we translate knowledge into equitable solution? Because really, it is to look at our hormone, the signal, and how we will achieve good health status. So from signal to solution, if we will move from the signal of the hormone to the solution that the hormone discrepancies, either too much, too little, or not recognizing the receptor causes, we must, one, have early detection through improved screening strategies. There must be the context-specific research in African population. Like I said, for too long, we rely on other people's population, and that's why the things that has refused to kill them in the West is still slaughtering and murdering us here. Simply because most of those drugs are made to fit their genetics and genomics, never our own. The polymorphism is for them and not for us. Now, from signal to solution, what must change? We must act at multiple levels. The first thing we must change, as I said, is there must be early detection. We must begin to promote routine screening for diabetes, thyroid function, and reproductive hormones. We must work together to develop low-cost, point-of-care diagnostic tools for our resource-limited setting. 2, contextualized research. And I will say it again and again. We must begin to generate local data. Nigeria and Africa cannot rely solely on Western data sets, where we now know for sure that our genetics and our genomics differ. And it is here that I want to plead majorly with all of us in EMSON. It is time for us to collaborate. The clinicians have what we need, the bench people have the hands-on. We must begin to do that, which would make us have data sets that is local to Nigeria. We must begin to study environmental and lifestyle factors that is unique to our population. Our own environmental issues and factors. And we now know that most of these environmental issues and factors can actually be part of these hormonal issues that we're discussing, plus our lifestyle. And most of them differ greatly from what we see in other populations. And this is our vision at the University of Lagos Center for Genomics of Non-Communicable Diseases and Personalized Healthcare. We realize everything about us in Nigeria differs. We also realize we need to get data sets for our own use. 3, precision and personalization. Even in low resource setting, we can begin risk stratification and targeted interventions. We should use clinical patterns intelligently where advanced tools are limited. And it is in the clinics that those clinical patterns occur. Are we using them the way we should use them? Because if we do, we might then be solving some of these health issues. And the goal at the Center for Genomics of Non-Communicable Diseases and Personalized Healthcare, UNILAG, is that at some point, we will be able to have precise, personalized healthcare. 4, the healthcare system must be strengthened. The laboratory infrastructure must be improved. We really are grateful. In the University of Lagos, there are central research laboratories where big and real equipment are located, and that actually assists some of the research that we do. And our clinicians, please begin to train more endocrinologists. I remember the last time at the meeting, and somebody jokingly said, how many people here want to actually specialize in endocrinology? And I hope you remember my president, when your people said, oh, the work is a lot, but the resource, the remuneration is not as much as the work. I don't know what we can do about the remuneration. I understand the work is a lot, but please, we still need to train more people. We also need to train more basic and laboratory scientists. We must get back to the foundation. We must begin to work together as a body where we can have good data sets to begin to work with. And I pray that at some point, endocrine care will be integrated into primary health care. Our society, the Endocrine and Metabolic Society of Nigeria, was involved last year in putting together some manuals. We did that for diabetes management last year. And I'm glad to say that I was one of those who wrote that up under the leadership of our late president, Professor Rege, and the current president, Professor Oloko, and the entire executive team. That for thyroid disease management is ongoing. And so let me say well done to the executive. I hope other hormone-related diseases will also follow the same suit. Now, to share, we must share responsibility. We have to begin to share responsibility. Hormonal diseases are increasing globally, but the responses in the different areas are remaining unequal. The response in our nation, the response in Africa, the response in the West. But let me tell you that the science and the mode of operation of hormone is global. But for us to find the solution to the hormone must become local. And that's why I am encouraging that we begin to collaborate, we begin to improve access to care. We can no longer do research in silos. We must begin to think of advanced research, and as a body meet and sit down to write proposals that will win us enough to do the kind of research that we need for this kind of call that ESC has given us this year. And that, trust me, will reduce disparities in outcome. Like I said, there are a few diseases that are no longer killing them in the West. Because from birth, the analysis, the genomic analysis have been done for that child. And so the child is prepared for the world ahead. They are already looking after the child even before the onset of the diseases. Meanwhile, if you're not careful, before the age of 5, the outcome for such a newborn baby might actually be mortality. So it becomes my own clarion call, and it becomes that we must begin to share responsibilities. Well, my contribution to unveiling the hormone puzzle, like I said, at the Center of Genomics of Non-Communicable Diseases and Personalized Healthcare, University of Lagos, where we think we should be headed to as a nation, is to have a Nigerian data set, 1. 2, to be able to use those data sets to begin to treat, personalize, and do personalized healthcare for our nation. And 2nd of July last year, I did give the 16th inaugural lecture in this university, and the title was Unveiling the Puzzle of Hormones, a Biochemist Odyssey. The barcode is there. Now, the whole essence of this was that I unveiled the hormone. I saw the hormone as a puzzle, and I journeyed through hormone from when I started being interested in the hormone and how the hormone had been implicated in several diseases, from diabetes to all the diseases, including and not limited to cancers. And I also chronicled my research in that area. And one of the research is this. When an individual has cancer, one of the major things that bothers them is how to preserve ovarian function and fertility, and how they can live the kind and the quality of life that they desire, especially for those who are going through chemotherapy and are of the reproductive age. And so we, in collaboration with our colleagues at the Lagos University Teaching Hospital, we try to monitor the ovarian reserves in the course of chemotherapy, because it is the ovarian reserve that will predict the patient's reproductive lifespan. And we looked at the anti-Mullerian hormone, AMH, We also looked at inhibin B, and these are two critical biomarkers that are involved in the regulation and assessment of reproductive function, particularly in female. The study showed that the treatment of female cancer patients with chemotherapy regimen is accompanied by ovarian toxicity, involving decreased ovarian reserve, as well as menstrual cycle cessation, hence affecting reproduction in female cancer patients. This is one of the examples of looking at how the hormone affects fertility and how we can move from looking at the disease and seeing if there are solutions. And indeed, there are solutions to this. Also, I told you that sometimes the signal could be good and the receptors can actually be the issue. So I also looked at the hormone receptors in relation with cancer genomics. In our center, we have always believed in multidisciplinary research. And so we approached TED Fund, the tertiary fund, with two different proposals. And I was the PI of one of them, where we looked at the genomic variants and epigenetic fingerprinting of prostate cancer in Nigeria for the detection of new drug targets. I'm glad to say that both, and the second one is exploring genomic signature of prostate carcinoma for the circulating tumor cells for the development of biomarkers for early diagnosis and prognosis. I was also part of the team of that second one. I'm glad to say that we are done with both. We have our papers written, published. All the mentees on the two have graduated with their PhDs. And one thing that we got from the first one, was that we found 26 new genes that are potentials for diagnosis for prostate cancer. And work is ongoing in relationship with some diagnostic companies on how to turn this into proper, how to patent a diagnostic kit out of the 26 genes we were able to identify amongst Nigerians. And what does that tell us? It tells us that if finally we get that kit, we might actually be looking at using the kit that is actually specific with data sets for Nigeria. And it is all thanks to University of Lagos, all thanks to TED Fund. Now, like I said, these studies, we focused on the genomic profiling of hormonal receptors and apoptotic genes in cancer, especially the PCA and the BCA. We used genomic biomarkers for early diagnosis using thorough methods and prognosis. We looked at genomic variants and differential expression of genes for personalized healthcare. I told you that is our goal in the center. We looked at the epigenetic profiling for development of new drug targets for the treatment of cancers. That was the whole essence of the second grant. Can there be new drug targets? And I can tell you that yeah, the answer was yes and yes and yes. And so those are part of my own intervention in looking at hormone, either as hormone and its signal, or as hormone and the receptor, and whether they are following the critical terms that I showed you at the beginning of this webinar. Now, these are my final thoughts, that hormones are central regulators of health and diseases, that there are many non-endocrine diseases that are actually endocrine driven, that cancer biology is deeply intertwined with hormonal signaling. And I can tell you that is yes, yes, yes. That Nigeria and the rest of Africa faces a dual burden. We face the burden of underdiagnosis, and we face the burden of rising incidence. The future lies in precision, prevention, and integration. Understanding hormone is no longer optional, because hormone is the foundational to modern medicine. From molecules to bedside, from signal to solution, and it is simply because hormones truly matters. As we celebrate this year's World Hormone Day, let us move beyond awareness to intentional action. We have been creating awareness. Can we move to intentional action? Where we can detect earlier, we can do better and deeper research. We can collaborate wider, and we can treat our patients, that's to our clinicians. You can begin to treat the result of this collaboration to treat your patients better. Because from Nigeria to Africa to the world, one truth remains: hormone matters, and our response must matter even more. I want to say a big thank you to everyone. I think I have been able to say indeed that hormones matter, and our response must even matter more. Thank you very much. I want to warmly say that if there are questions, or I'll hand over back to the Secretary General, Dr. Lopade. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Adironke Samuel, for the beautiful lecture. I'm sure everybody will definitely attest to it that this is the second inaugural lecture that you just given again. So, and she has talked about because hormone matters from signal to solution in diseases. She told us that hormones are signals, the language of life. They are chemical messengers, and they are released at precise time, acting at precise targets, regulating growth. She told us that hormones are language of physiological control when they are distorted disease results, from metabolism to malignancy, from fertility to inflammation. She discussed and told us that hormones act as signals, regulating growth, metabolism, and reproduction. She went ahead to talk about hormonal signaling, and she talked about the central thesis, which is signal generation, signal transmission, signal interpretation. And scientists have identified more than 50 hormones, or some estimated there are more than 200 hormones. And diseases arise when there is failure at any of these levels of central thesis that she mentioned. Too much signals, too little signals, wrong signal interpretation. And virtually all organs in the body produces hormone. When hormone signals go wrong, there's a global and local burden. And she gave us projection of endocrine diseases in Nigeria, in Africa, highlighting that there's a growing silence of endocrine epidemics. And she went to the United States to give us the figure there. And she talked about bridging the gap where basic sciences meet clinical reality, collaboration. She talked about challenges that we are facing, issue of costs, access, awareness, complexity, plus health system constraint. So and she gave a question that is setting me to think, how do genetic and environmental factors in Nigeria and African population influence hormonal pathway? And we must translate this knowledge into clinical care. And she gave some solutions. And some of these solutions include early detection to improve, that's by improving screening, contextualized and researches, precision and personalization, health system strengthening. Then she talked about a shared responsibility on our part. Then she talked about a contribution to unveiling the hormone puzzle. And our final thought was that hormones are central regulators of health and diseases. The future lies in precision, prevention, and integration. And we should move from awareness to intentional action. I think this is a brief summary of what she has talked about. And if you want to listen to this presentation again, you can go to our YouTube page. It's already on our YouTube page. So if you have questions, comments, can we just raise our electronic hands and ask your question? She's available to answer our question. Do you have any questions for Professor Samuel? Okay, so there's a question in the chat box. Let me just try and read that. Or where's the chat now? So, Professor Ahmed, there's a question in the chat box for you. And the question is saying, thank you so much for the amazing presentation. And my question is, how can scientists, especially African scientists, start acting on personalized treatment, especially since most individuals are invested in other countries' health care, like US? I understand that other ways to do that was highlighted in the presentation, but I would appreciate if you could shed more light on it, ma. This is a question by Mercy Awoshika.
All right, maybe I'll take that. And thank you so much. First, because of proven integrity, the vision is directed towards the West. But when it comes to different genetics and genomics, we have the population. And so these days, if you write a grant, most of the time, they're asking you, what is your population? Because they know this is where the population is. And that is why I want us to begin to take that advantage. If you take a look at ordinary Nigeria, you can imagine, take a look at the West. If you are very observant, a typical Ondo man is not a typical Oshu man, and is not a typical Ogun man. We look different, and there are some polymorphisms that are different in us. Can we begin to use our population for this research? Because if we do not apply population, personalized healthcare is not possible. Personalized healthcare would look at that which is common in a population and that which is not common in a population. And that is how personalized healthcare comes to be. So yes, the world is headed that way, but we have the population to back up any research in that realm.
Okay, thank you, ma. I think another person asked another question, Aditoro, 2001. So what is the most important hormonal diseases in Nigeria? Any epidemiologic study of the hormonal diseases?
There are so many epidemiological studies, and one of the commonest is diabetes mellitus, obesity, and there are epidemiological studies to back what I am saying. Before the intervention of supplementation, the thyroid was a major issue. I don't know how old this person is, but if you are old enough to be about 50, 60, you will notice that way back then, almost 1 in every 3 people you come across has some goiter, until there was a policy of supplementing our salt with iodine. But even still, thyroid is still an issue. I told you that this society is putting together the thyroid management handbook. So thyroid is also a major hormonal disease. Now, most cancers are implicated. Hormone is implicated in most cancers. And you will hear something like triple negative breast cancer, meaning that breast cancer is negative, has negative receptor to 3 hormones. The androgen hormone is also implicated in the prostate cancer. So yeah, there are several hormonal diseases in Nigeria, and all have epidemiological studies backing them up.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. I want to recognize Professor Olamoyigun. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Let me appreciate Professor Samuel for that Wonderful presentation. That was a masterpiece. Well done. My
Thank
question
you.
it's on collaboration that you talked about, and I quite agree with you that there must be a very close knit or a sort of marriage between basic and clinical, and even the design of our proposal and all that. So I believe that the initiation for such proposal can come from clinical and then inviting basic, but can also come from basic and then bring in the clinician. So how do we put that into practice? How do we actualize that? Just like you said, we have the population, and apart from the population, we also have the human resource, whether in the basic or in the clinical aspect. So, but how do we actualize that so that we won't just be proposing it, but we'll bring it into a reality? I think it's high time that we did that to do um study on some of the things or all of the things that you have highlighted, which are hormonally controlled. So once again, that was a wonderful presentation. Well done.
Thank you very much, Prof. We have the best of the platforms we can ever think of in Nigeria. EMSON is the best of the platforms. And so I am sure living here today, our president would make you the chair of that collaboration. Something tells me so. And I must say a big thank you, Professor Tubanja. Thank you very much, ma. It's nice to see you here, ma. Thank you, ma.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Aderoke Sama. So, Babalola is asking a question. He said he noticed that some women develop hormonal imbalance which lead to other diseases in their middle ages, around late 40s. What can be done to mitigate this?
Thank you very much, and thank you for that question. Like I said, do we begin to integrate these tests into our yearly medical tests? And so that if we catch any imbalance on time, we can begin to mitigate against it so that it does not trigger a second imbalance or a second issue. So that's the only thing we can do. Early diagnosis. But you see, for some of us, because of cost, because of awareness, because of availability, we're still looking for our daily bread. And so, even including, and let me just be sincere, hormonal tests are one of the most expensive. So, including that in our daily rigor is a big issue. But that is the only way to go, to catch and diagnose early so that treatments can begin.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. I don't know whether there's any other question before we begin to wind down. I don't know whether our president has any comments to pass.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Professor Samuel. A wonderful and exciting lecture you have given. You have stimulated discussions. I'm very happy to note that this meeting had attendance up to 77 people. That is to address your anxiety in the preparation that you are not going to get a good turnout. So at least we have addressed one of your early concerns. Then the talk about collaboration. I like the emphasis by Professor Lamayogu. But if I must say something, Professor Samuel, you have done excellent well. We are happy with a lot of things you are doing. You seem to be in the good books of TED Fund. And so your research, they easily pass through. Maybe your previous positive experience is making a positive legacy effect to them. And so they don't have problems awarding you grants. Can you then begin to think in your design of research proposals from the outset, working together with colleagues in the clinical aspect, so that it is not you in the basic sciences alone that is doing this. Whatever it is you are doing in the basic sciences, the ultimate of it is that there should be a translation to clinical relevance in a way that it will be of direct benefit to the patients that we see every day. You talked very beautifully about new hormone receptors that will form targets for therapy and interventions. These are excellent areas that we think that if you stretch that proposal or that research, if you stretch it a bit, there will be a good ground for collaboration with colleagues in the clinical side. And not for only you, but for all of us. Each one of us developing any research item or idea, please, from conception. These days, people don't work in silos. Let's learn to engage colleagues from the basic sciences and colleagues in basic sciences involve colleagues from the clinical sciences, vice versa. It's a win-win for all of us, and we will go a very long way. So this will be my few comments, but I think it's been a wonderful evening, and we have done a great deal of learning, and we have addressed Professor Samuel's fears that there was not going to be good attendance. Finally, I see that she did a lot of advertisement. Dr. Olopade, please make sure you collect money. She did a lot of advertisement for our Center for Genomic Studies of the University of Lagos. It's good she's telling us what they do, and they are quite attractive, but you need to for the free audience that we are giving you. Otherwise, it's wonderful, and I thank you very much for the meeting. Good evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. So on behalf of the executive and members of EMSON, I want to express our profound gratitude to Professor Aderonke Samuel for gracing and giving us a wonderful and excellent lecture. I want to say your expertise and your passion continue to inspire our endocrine community. And we also want to thank all our invited guests and members of EMSON. I want to thank you for finding time out of your busy clinical and academic schedule to be part of this program. Your participation, questions, and contribution has enriched this dialogue, and it has reminded us why collaboration is vital in advancing hormonal health in Nigeria. I want to thank the Secretariat and every member that made, everyone that's made this program a success. I want to say the shared knowledge today will strengthen our collaborative resolve in improving awareness, early detection, and care for endocrine disorders. And I pray that the impact of this World Hormonal Day will extend beyond this webinar and into find the relevance in our clinical practice, in our communities, in our policies, and in collaboration from the bedside, from the bench to the bedside. Thank you, and we look forward to continued partnership between ourselves. Let us have a lovely evening, everybody. Thank you for coming for this webinar. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.